They said it was impossible. They said the odds were stacked against you. The hurdles were too great, and the opponent was too powerful. And yet, here you are, unshaken and indestructible. Because of this, it was always yours to claim, not by happenstance, but because you were made for it. The world does not get to set your bounds. They do not get to write your finale. You are more than simply a name in the throng. You are an outlier. They never saw the anomaly or the force approaching. You go into the fire not because you have to, but because you refuse to allow it to define you. Let them underestimate you. Allow them to believe they have you cornered. They have no notion what will happen next. The stage is set. The spotlight is yours. Show them why they weren't intended to win. They believe they have you figured out, but you're already ahead, playing a game that they don't even comprehend. Just when they think they've got it figured out, reality alters, and what was definite turns into pandemonium. They grab for you but grasp nothing. You don't just evade. You redefine the battlefield itself. Just a second. You are right there. Their goal is their prey. Then you rewrite the script, making their approach seem out of date. Their plans are irrelevant. Their preconceptions disintegrate when they see your movements. Fluid, untraceable, untouchable. The understanding comes slowly, first as perplexity, then disbelief. This was not luck. This was not a fluke. You live outside of their expectations, and they're straining to accept that. The assurance in their eyes evaporates, giving way to the growing realization that they were horribly mistaken. Their confidence was a well-crafted illusion, and you just broke it. The transition is mild at first. The hesitation in their posture, the hint of uncertainty in their faces. However, it worsens, turning into doubt and dread. Their hubris was based on the notion that they controlled the result and that success was inevitable. Now, fractures in that belief are appearing. Unstoppable. One of them lets out a faint murmur, just a whisper, but just enough to corroborate the reality. That should not be feasible. The stillness that follows is more audible than any war cry. There's nothing else to explain. Words would be meaningless to those who felt they had you measured. Allow them to scrabble for an explanation. Allow them to hunt for patterns when none exist. You do not obey their rules. You do not fit into their rationale. Every step you take, every action you make, is a lesson they were not expecting to learn. They came anticipating a battle which they could foresee. Instead, they discovered something beyond their understanding. The game they believed they were playing. It ended before it started. Leave a comment. I changed the rules. If you refuse to accept the constraints they impose, then every effort to contain you just feeds your ascension. If the obstacles they erect become the exact stairs you climb, they will call your initial breakthrough luck, your second coincidence. Your third is an outlier. However, the weight of evidence is unmistakable. The stats betray them. Their calculations fail, and their once steady voices falter. You've seen them ignore impossible situations before. However, they are met with one that they cannot ignore. It rattles them. It frightens them because it contradicts their knowledge, insight, and confidence. You weren't expected to win. Their need for control evolves into desperation, feverish speculations, and incorrect conclusions. They look for flaws in reality, attempting to explain why they are losing a struggle they were certain they would win. They seek for reasons, refusing to accept the obvious. It was not a trick. It wasn't a chance. Every difficulty you overcome, every barrier you broke down, had inevitability written all over it. They kept you inside their borders, thinking you would rebel against them. Instead, you broke them completely. If God is for us, who can be against us? Romans 8:31. They believed they had everything sorted out. They believed they had created a universe in which everything followed their rules and power was reserved for those who played the game according to their conception. They taught themselves that strength was predictable, consequences were controllable, and boundaries were absolute. They created mechanisms to assure that no one could outperform them. No one could go outside of the framework they had established. But then you arrived, and everything changed since you didn't fit within their boxes. You don't follow their rules. You were never supposed to wait your turn to request permission to move based on their time frame. Now they see it. They recognize that every setback designed to shatter you just increased your determination. Every impediment in your road became another step ahead. They tried to define you by your failures, but you never remained down long enough for them to write the finale. And this frightens them because they cannot explain it. They are unable to control it. They cannot stop it. Leave a comment. I am the shifter. If every impediment designed to stop you becomes the basis for your success, if every effort to stop you merely fueled your speed, if every system created to confine you has been forced to adapt to your presence, they are now scurrying to find out how they lost control. I'm trying to comprehend how someone like you can keep growing, progressing, and dominating. Without their permission, they escalate, believing that if they merely apply more pressure and tighten their hold, they will ultimately stop you. But all they're doing is hastening their own doom. Because you do not break under pressure. You do not move backwards. You do not disintegrate when others expect you to. And this understanding shocks them to the core. Because the reality is, they were never as strong as they believed. Their power was based on deception, on systems that only functioned when everyone cooperated. But you were never a part of the equation. Silence spreads like a slow poison, and as understanding sets in, anxiety rises. The air itself seems thicker. Their steps are less firm, and their coordination is disintegrating. This is no longer merely a war. It's something deeper, more primitive. The dread is not only on their faces. It is in their hesitancy. The way they grasp their firearms is too tight. They exchange eyes, seeking comfort. They no longer have one. They stutter, speak incoherently, and have a disbelieving tone. Another person makes an involuntary step back, the first fissure in a crumbling foundation. Someone another, hands trembling, decides to surrender before the combat is even ended. It is not simply fear. It is recognition. They aren't just losing. They have already lost. No words are required. You could explain. So, why bother? Their failure is not due to a lack of skills. It is their inability to acknowledge that this was never their war to win. You do not fight according to their rules. You do not play their game. They anticipated opposition. Instead, they faced inevitable. This is not a contest. It is a demonstration. And they are the spectators of their own downfall. Leave a comment. I can change the course of events. If you refuse to be constrained by their limitations, then every effort to restrict you simply fuels your climb. If their building falls as soon as you go outdoors, they held to the belief that everything was by chance. But you were an outlier, an exception rather than the norm. But reality does not bend for them. It bends around you. Statistics betray them. Their own calculations fail them, and the weight of indisputable evidence becomes unbearable. They believed they could foretell every consequence. And yet, here you are. Desperation evolves into denial. They look for explanations. Is there any rationale for how this fits into the world? They understand. They say it is unjust, unnatural. They hypothesize. They rationalize. They try to reinterpret what they can't control. Because confronting the truth is much more terrible than denying its irrelevance. Their guidelines were never considered laws. Their control was never total. You are evidence that limits are fictitious, that the impossible is nothing more than an idea waiting to be dismissed. They once felt they had molded the world. They now know it wasn't theirs to shape in the first place. No weapon made against them will succeed, and every mouth that will rise against them in judgment, you must condemn. Isaiah 5417. They erected walls around you, believing they could contain what was never intended to be confined. They drew designs, ran calculations, and set regulations in an effort to keep what they were never intended to govern. But they had no idea that the instant you came in, their foundation had already began to fracture. You are not just another piece in their jigsaw. You are not a cog in their machine. You are the disruptor. The change in the tide was the one factor they could never anticipate. And that is why they fear you. Because their system was designed for predictability, with calculations that presume everyone follows the same rules. However, you were never limited by their formulae. They had a screenplay, a plan, and a prearranged ending, and you tore it apart just by being. They called you impossible because they couldn't measure you. They labeled you an abnormality because they couldn't manage you. But they refused to acknowledge that you were never theirs to define. Leave a comment. I'm the exception. If they are meticulously made, plans disintegrate when you enter, as do their expectations. If their designs mean nothing when you come because they created a world based on your absence, now they have to deal with your presence. They work in whispers, in closed-door meetings, and in strategy sessions where they talk quietly, certain that they can pull the strings from the shadows. They believed that concealment would give them power. But here's something they never understood. What is designed to rise will rise, and what is meant to stand will remain still. They began their assaults with the belief that precision would make the difference, that they could outmaneuver something they had no control over in the first place. But every move they make works against them. Every blow they throw causes unexpected rebounds. Their weaponry, tactics, and certainty. Everything crumbles before it ever touches you. They've seen far too many of their own people collapse, not because of your actions, but because of their own mistakes. They attempted to cut you down, only to damage their own foundation. They attempted to keep you out, only to find themselves stuck in the exact cage they constructed for you. Because they didn't realize that something larger was moving with you, something they couldn't identify or oppose. It is the force that converts resistance into momentum, shifting each assault into your acceleration. They can't label it. They can't touch it, but they can sense it. And that scares them. Because you are never supposed to bow. You are never intended to fold. Now all they can do is watch you ascend. Untouchable, unstoppable, undeniable. Initially, they dismiss it as luck, coincidence. However, those who have seen enough know better. Hesitation spreads like an illness. Among them, they've seen too many people wager against you and lost everything. When they talk about you, they lower their voices, as if mentioning you too loudly might have repercussions. This is not only about strategy. It's not only about resilience. There is something in your life that unravels devastation, and before it reaches you, they place hurdles in your road just to trip themselves. They conspire against you just to get caught in their own plans. Those who were once convinced now walk warily, reluctant to question what they don't comprehend. There is no formula for defining momentum, no science. That explains why turmoil surrounds you but never absorbs you. They look for significance, but you were never intended to be dissected or explained. You're designed to keep going. You're not here by chance. If you sense a tug, a deep feeling that you have been selected, now is your time. Click the super thank you button and contribute $50 or more to get deeper insights, unique information, and a path that fits with your divine destiny. This is not only a gift. It's a proclamation, a step toward being the person you were intended to be. Take the call, walk with us, and totally embrace your destiny. Your adventure starts now. They have transformed you into an unsolvable issue, a mystery. They cannot let go. Every action you make is recorded, evaluated, and broken down in an effort to identify the defect in your pattern. They've crushed many others by forecasting their actions, converting humans to data points, and controlling consequences before they happen. But you refuse to comply. You do not fit in their charts. Do not take the path they anticipate. They trace your past, but it refuses to shape your future. You are a paradox. They cannot delete their research, which should have made you predictable. However, every theory they develop breaks apart the minute you act. Equations shatter in your wake. Probabilities become meaningless. They do not fail to comprehend you. They are failing to see that their system was never designed to accommodate anything like you in the first place. The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Psalm 118, verse 22. They believed they had everything sorted out. They believed they had the plan, strategy, and authority to control the outcome of whatever they measured. They calculated. They organized their surroundings in ways that made sense to them. But they didn't account for you. Because you don't fit their template, and were never meant to. They placed their confidence in institutions, information, and techniques that they said were infallible. They researched trends, evaluated the history, and created formulae. They were certain that they would remain at the top. However, the instant you walked in, everything changed, since you are not a variable that they can control. You are the force that rewrites the equation, unsettling them since you do not follow their rules. You do not comply to their expectations. They attempted to foresee your actions, believing that if they understood you, they would be able to control you. However, the closer they look, the less they comprehend. The more they strive, the more their reasoning fails them. Leave a comment. I am an outlier. If their expectations are dashed when you arrive, then their well-planned strategies become worthless in your presence. If their calculations fail because they didn't account for someone like you, they believe themselves that knowledge equals power. Those with the ability to define everything around them have that control. Perhaps that was true until now, since you were not supposed to be researched, dissected, or anticipated. You were destined to climb beyond their expectations. They tightened their hold, certain that if they only analyzed you more, they could break you down into something explainable. They will find a method to stop you, but they are searching in the wrong area, because they are unable to comprehend what drives you. Their hypotheses, logic, and elegantly presented conclusions. Everything unravels the instant you walk in, and now they are rushing for answers, because their once solid base is now shaky and their order is disintegrating. They devised the rules, swore by the ideals, and trusted the systems. Nothing is holding up anymore. They felt they could continue with their expertise, but all they accomplished was demonstrate how narrow their comprehension actually is. And that is why they fear you, because you are not constrained by their reasoning, conclusions, or underlying assumptions. You exist beyond of their grasp and expectations. They created their reality with the belief that they had covered every possible scenario. However, they never accounted for you. And now all they can do is watch as their structure crumbles and you continue to climb. They regard domination as a matter of limitation, as if blocking off avenues will guarantee your absence. They cut entry points, strengthen obstacles, and tighten their grip. Nonetheless, you consistently appear in unexpected places, like a current sliding through the crevices. A force is moving beyond their grasp. The links they try to dissolve reform in new, stronger ways that are beyond their control. They work inside rigid frameworks, mistaking barriers for absolutes. However, you traverse across dimensions that others do not perceive. Every attempt to delete you is futile. They remove your name from records and strive to delete evidence of your existence. Nonetheless, you stay. Your presence is unmistakable, not via force, but due to inevitability. They observe with increasing concern as chances present themselves in unexpected ways. The places they have held down merely serve as fresh sites of growth. The resources they withhold merely shift to your benefit. They assess power in concrete terms, mistake sight for influence, forgetting that your reach stretches down hidden passageways. They try to foresee your moves, but each one fails. By the time they respond, you've already passed them. They believed you played by the same rules, but you do not take pathways. You make them. They are still attempting to map the ground, unconscious that it is moving under their feet. No eye has seen, no ear has heard, and no mind has imagined what God has planned for those who love him. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 9. They sit back and observe, certain that if they study you long enough, they will discover the secret, some hidden weakness, or hole in your foundation. They think that by analyzing your steps and tracking your motions, they can forecast when you will ultimately crack. They believe it's just a matter of time. However, time is not on their side. Because every time they count you out, you get up. Every time they anticipate you to fall, you go higher. They're groping for solutions, looking for patterns that don't exist, trying to apply reasoning to something that was never intended to be comprehended, only witnessed. See? They call it luck because it is the only way they can explain it. Because stating the truth would imply that something is going on that they are unaware of. They murmur behind closed doors, reminding themselves that no one can beat the odds indefinitely. However, the issue is not with the odds. The issue is that they never really grasped the game in the first place. Leave a comment. I'm the exception. If each trap they lay becomes another stepping stone, if every attempt to hold you down simply propels you upward, they see the impossible bending about you if every hurdle they put in front of you clears itself at the precise right time. They watch you navigating through storms without being carried away, venturing into pandemonium and emerging unscathed. It rattles them to their core because they were taught that power is won via strategy, and that success is determined only by work. But you're not playing their game. You don't follow their metrics. You do not succeed by their criteria. They convinced themselves they could follow your progress and predict when you'd stumble. However, every time they hunt for indications of weakness, all they discover is evidence that you were never supposed to fall. And now, they are running out of explanations. They don't know how to describe you since you don't fit into their categories. You do not follow their equations. Don't follow their reasoning. They attempted to write you off, but the narrative continued. They attempted to seal the door, but another opened. They attempted to test your boundaries, but you stepped past them before they knew what was going on. And that is why they fear you. Because you do not justify expectations. You eliminate them. You were never intended to fit into their systems or to be governed by their forecasts. They trusted in their plans more than they did in your resilience, which was their first error. Because they failed to see that failure was never part of your plan. They can't understand that you exist outside their projections, beyond the edges of possibility. They increase their efforts, pushing harder and hitting with more accuracy, sure that more power will eventually defeat you. But there's no equation. They have no plan. They take into consideration the reality that every assault, limitation, and effort to repress you simply drives your growth. They press, expecting resistance to weaken you, but all they end up doing is purifying you. Their greatest calculations fail beneath the weight of your determination. The fundamental core of their approach breaks when they learn that momentum does not come only from planning. They believe that power belonged to those who took it. They never realized how important control was in achieving domination. True strength is impenetrable, resistant to interference, and unshakable under pressure. They mistake stillness for reluctance, not realizing that it is the hush before the change, the peaceful time before the inevitable change. They anticipated conflict, but instead they are disintegrating under the weight of their own aspirations. Their defeat stems not from direct conflict, but from the very acts they believed would assure their success. They look for evidence of weakness, but all they perceive is their own demise happening in real time. The position they had, the influence they depended on, all slide away as the edifice they erected fails to contain what was never within their control. They are not losing because of what you did. They are losing because they failed to see that you were never within their grasp to begin with. Every effort to stop you has resulted in their becoming the architects of their own irrelevance. The triumph they once thought was theirs. It never was. They sought to draw the past forward, as if old wounds could still tie you. But those bonds have long ago broken. Their attempts to confine you crumbled under their own weight. The allegations flow through fingers that no longer have any claim to your identity. They murmur it in the darkness, believing that the echoes would reach you and bind you to the world they once ruled. However, your name no longer belongs to them. It echoes in places beyond their grasp, imbued with something unshakable. They are concerned not with what you have done, but with what you represent, something they can no longer control or maintain. Their biggest mistake was expecting you would stay inside the confines they set. However, with each step ahead, their importance lessens. Their grip diminishes. Their animosity is nothing more than a burden they must bear alone, getting heavier with each victory they vowed would never come. However, their incredulity is ineffective in this situation. Your climb was never intended to make sense to those who were never supposed to succeed. They misinterpreted the essence of your life. You do not experience the same gravitational pull that holds them anchored to a disintegrating world. They base their society on control, mistaking confinement for power. But you slid through the cracks, changing the ground they once said was unbreakable. They expected you to shatter under pressure and surrender under force. But every effort to shatter you merely reshaped you into something they couldn't understand. They employ quiet as a weapon, expecting that absence would erase you, but it instead strengthens your presence. Their resistance became your impetus, their antagonism, the fire that honed your blade. Now all they can do is watch. Those who formerly set the pace are now scrambling to catch up. Their confidence erodes with every step you travel beyond their grasp. They assumed that time was on their side. It's time to plan. It's time to suppress. It's time to pick your destiny. But time has never been theirs to control. It conforms to your will, evolving in ways they never expected. And now they're forced to watch as their own irrelevance settles in like a storm they can't escape. Continue to hold stable. Move with purpose. Allow their mistrust to sink into insignificance. And when the time comes, speech, not for those who attempted to bury you, but for those who are still longing to be free. Those standing on the precipice, ready to jump into the flames and seize what was always intended to be theirs.